just on the idea of civil disobedience, I once heard previous Senator Scott Ludlam be asked the question of would he break the law, knowingly break a law. And he said, if it's a bad law, then it should be broken. And I have to say, it's the issue that you're fighting on that will determine how far a person goes. Because I know people that will break the law, civil disobedience, whatever, in the forest, to make their point. And I'm so happy that there are people there that will do that, because that's not something that I'm yet ready to do. But I just, and I don't know what it would be, the trigger point for me, but if there's a bad law and I know that it shouldn't be continue, yeah, then I think I could get to the point where I would stand up and knowingly break the law or whatever laws were in place in order to get that changed. But it's an individual thing for each person, I think, to understand. And I'm just so grateful that there are people out there who don't think being arrested is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. When I see the things happening around the world and some of the arrests that are being made, in some ways, I almost wish that I could be there fighting with them. But, you know, we only have one life to live, and you make the best you can of it. You do what you can to speak up for those who can't, and hopefully get the changes you need. But civil disobedience is definitely a part of it, is definitely one of those actions that we can do.
I think that's actually a quite interesting point, because if we look to other countries and other systems, I think we have really plenty of reason to complain here what's wrong. But at the same time, we live into a country, we can meet like this, we can sit together, and we can even resist in many ways, or even break the laws, but what happens after that, the penalties are quite low. We are extreme lucky situation. If we do the same thing in China, for example, or in other places, there might be definitely a different outcome. This is actually a positive thing, and we should think about, we can actually do things, and the repercussions for us are actually quite minor, so we don't have to be threatened with longer jail terms, or we don't get shot or something else, what happened to some of those people here and the war we're having there. So we had a really lucky situation to do that, and it should be encouraging, because whoever puts this, the rules here and the constitution together in Australia, okay, there's one, we collect parties, and that might not work, but there's so many other ways we can stand up and make the politicians know what we think and what we think should happen. And that's fantastic we can do that, and we should actually use this opportunity we're having here, because it's really fantastic what we're able to do here. That's quite important.
I'd like to comment on that briefly, that Extinction Rebellion in Britain are very, very aware that they are in a privileged position, because it's not such a police state as in Britain as it is in other places, and they are able to take their action and know that they're not going to be really, really badly mishandled. But the other thing that they're very clear about is that we who live in countries that are relatively free have a responsibility in a way to use that situation to enable us to take up the action and to address the fundamental problems, so for the benefit of our own citizens and for other citizens of the world. So it's interesting, XR quote conservative philosophers, some of the favourite philosophers of conservative thinkers, by saying that, and I can't remember which one it was, but one of them said that if your government is not protecting your security, you have an obligation to rebel. And so they're pointing out that governments are not protecting us from climate change and the environmental catastrophe. So from that point of view, in the conservative philosophy, we actually have an obligation to rebel. So.
Okay, if I mildly, shortly interrupt this discussion here, we have someone from Sea Shepherd, and I think they have to go. They would like to make an announcement as well. Sorry, I don't know your name. Maybe.
Right, whoa. Kia ora whānau, and I want to say kai a wanyu, Pibbleman Nunga Buja, and it's wonderful to be back in this country. I've just spent the last 2 years backpacking through South America, Central America and so on, and the US, and it is scary over there. I mean, New York City's just banned the polystyrene wrapper. Well, that's fine. Get down to South America and try and do the same. It is scary. So what we're doing here is a small drop, but it's a drop. It's a step forward. A couple of points that have been raised up there by the group. One of the things that Sea Shepherd is very big on is direct action. You don't necessarily have to break the law, but you can get out there and be a part of making this a better world. Sea Shepherd run a marine debris campaign where we get out there on the beaches and we pick up the plastic that is blown in and floats in. Next one, by the way, quick plug, 14th of July, at Anvil's. The point raised earlier about in South America, Central America, there are activists there. There are people who are concerned there. Costa Rica, for one, nearly 100% renewable energy, 100% of the time. It's the cleanest Latin country I've ever seen. And the attitude there is they want it to be clean because they see what it does for them. You know, they don't even have an army. They refuse to have a military, and they have 3 pillars of society, which is education, health, and housing. That's how they look after their people. And the idea of governments changing, you know, that change comes from the people, us. We have to tell them what sort of a society that we want to live in, you know. So keep being vocal. Don't think it's pointless and useless. And after the recent federal election, I was despondent. I was devastated. But you got to pick yourself up and keep going, because if you don't, why? You know, we're just losing hope. We can't do that. Just from a local Sea Shepherd point of view, we do have, like I said, on the 14th, a beach clean-up, a marine debris campaign. If you want to get involved at Anvil's Beach, we have them here each summer in Denmark as well. And next Monday at Arana Cinema, we do have the screening of basically we have a defend, conserve, basically we have a Sea Shepherd, the latest Sea Shepherd film is showing. We'd love you to get out there and support us, and this is fantastic. The Arana, 6 o'clock. On Monday, 6 o'clock in Albany, yes. Well, there's only one Arana Cinema. This is fantastic. It's fantastic to see everyone here doing this and being concerned. You know, it's my grandson's future I'm worried about, and what his children are going to have to deal with, what we've left behind. So I want to do something about it, try and make it a bit better, a bit easier on them. But yeah, well done.
Just one more action that you can support is the Denmark Environment Center. They're trying to save Lake Jasper, which is in Dondrukasu National Park, save it from mining. And you can get involved over here as a stall if you want to put your name or some money. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, panel. Good on you guys. What a great festival. Yeah. I just wanted to add to that last discussion point, because I was lucky enough to have a power dinner during the James Price Point campaign with my 2 idols, Bob Brown and Christine Milne. And Christine had just taken over the Greens' leadership at that point, and she made this very fundamental point which really stuck with me, and that is that during the 80s and 90s and earlier, we didn't have a platform. We weren't in the halls of power. We couldn't have the discussion, and we couldn't advocate and have that sort of back and forth because the separation was so great. But now we have that, and we're in the halls of power, but there's no action. So we're sort of stifled. We're sort of stuck in this room having these discussions, and a lot of that discussion goes nowhere. And Christine said, we've got to get back out of the room. We can't forget the roots of these movements and where the power actually is. And the power sometimes is not in that discussion. It's when you step outside and you put your hand up and you say, no, it's not good enough. The discussion's over. Let's stand up and let's create action to make things. And I guess the the great example of that for me locally was walking alongside the kids as they did the school strike most recently, where they were told that they weren't allowed to have an impassioned discussion in their community, so they organised outside of that, and they stood up and they created some action, and it was so empowering and wonderful for them. And there was a group of 5 or 6 kids who were coming together, and it ended up being a couple of hundred that they brought together, and to see the look on their faces. And I guess that it's so easy to get overwhelmed in this discussion. And if you're on social media, if you're internet savvy, have a look at how many issues pop up and come at you every single day. And, you know, this idea that it's going to happen out there somewhere or it's going to happen online, I think it very much, the fatigue for me, this care fatigue comes over you, where it's like, where do you fucking start? Like, there is so much going on, where do you start? And that's where it does come back to, like, local action. Because you get fatigued with all this stuff out there, but you can create local activity and movement, whether it's about the Southwest Forest or talking locally about that refugee stuff, or deciding that you're going to organise a group of people to go to Perth to join an action that's happening there. But it's about these tangibles, and I think that what happens is we get lost in this online world and the fatigue creeps in, and so we end up stifled and inactive. We do nothing. And I am 100% guilty of that sort of fatigue. And so I've cut myself off, and I've just started to do local action stuff now, you know, getting involved with the Southwest Forest campaigns, and doing some action-oriented stuff, you know, and that's going to be what I put my passion and energy into, because I'm so fatigued with how many issues are out there, and I just get tired looking at it. So I think for me the local focus, and that local focus doesn't have to lack an international view or understanding, but we don't have to get fatigued by every other thing that's happening in the entire world, which happens all the time. So that was just a comment.
Thank you.
Can I just respond to that one? That was awesome, Rick. Yeah, thanks. And so I think what Rick's saying is really important, because he's engaged himself now physically and emotionally in something that he's passionate about. And I was just talking to Massa earlier on as well, Massa Anderson, who was doing the youth group. And we were talking about how when you engage, if you engage in just one thing that you're totally passionate about, something that's really important to you, you might not know what you're passionate about, but there might be something that's really important to you. And then when you start to engage in it, you might actually start to find that you are becoming, you suddenly realise that is your passion, that one thing that was niggling at you for such a long time. And I think that when we engage in something we're totally passionate about, it actually energises us. So that blanket of all those issues across the planet that give us fatigue, like Rick was saying, on the social media, on the news, whatever, I think that if we do what we can, just each person, we can be energised by that. So Massa was saying she actually feels like she's empowered because she's doing something about the thing that concerns and is most important to her. And I feel the same. So people say to me, I don't know how you do it. It must be so, you know. I actually am totally energised by what I do. I love going out there every Friday. We've got a group there now. We've all talked, and we've become sort of like a group of people that are very passionate about the same thing. And so we engage. And so it actually gives me energy and inspires me to do more. And not only that, though, what comes back is that even though it doesn't come back straight away, but things do start to come back, and that is another part of the what inspires me as well. So, for example, if we do our protest on the streets, we get a photo every week. All the people on Manus and Nauru, they see that photo, they are just totally like so heartwarmed that there's people actually care about them in Australia. And then there's groups all across Australia. So there are refugee groups all across Australia protesting every week, putting their photos up. So it's become this huge network. And then Denmark has actually become very famous Denmark is Denmark is the one place that everyone talks about. Everyone's heard about Denmark. There's a guy in Sydney who does music for refugees, and he phoned me up once because I took some musical instruments to Manus, and he said, "Oh, I heard that there was a huge protest in Denmark. There were hundreds there." And it was our Palm Sunday. I think there might have been 30 or 40 of us, and we didn't protest. We were standing in town there. But it's just that that's what we can all do. We can all do that, and I think it's a really important point. Yeah.
First, I just want to apologise to the Ramras that I wasn't able to be here this morning, but we all get split in all directions. And but there were 3 points I wanted to pick up from the last two people who had this microphone as my daughter goes past with no shoes on. Hey, daughter. The first one was, like Jasper got mentioned, but our wetlands are really under threat everywhere. And they are such an important part of our ecology. I think we've lost 50% of our wetlands since we have had colonisation, and it just is accelerating. So I really encourage you to support the Environment Centre, not just with Lake Jasper, which is one of the most beautiful places you can imagine, but all the wetlands that are under risk down here, Lake Vancouver, numerous others. And so if you want something that's a little bit more mainstream, just get involved with the Environment Centre and encourage them when we crack Lake Jasper to get on to the next one and the next one and the next one. The second thing I wanted to raise, and I apologise if someone's mentioned it earlier, but the Transition Town movement is a movement about acting locally, and it's a worldwide movement. It's got a lot of background to it. There's a lot of resources available to it. In a lot of towns, it drives the localisation that arises in dealing with climate change and just community sustainability. In Denmark, it hasn't needed to do that because there are so many active groups already. I think we've got the largest community participation in Australia and Denmark, and groups like the refugee group, the Citizens Climate Lobby, are doing the sort of things that in other places Transition Town would probably be driving. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have a place here. It provides sort of an umbrella where we can give a narrative over the top. When CWA put in a kitchen garden, we can go and say, you're just helping climate change here. There's a bigger picture. But the reason I want to raise it is if you are seeking a cause or an action that is about sustainability, it's about climate change, and you don't find a like-minded group, there is a large network that's loosely continued over the years. It's been fairly quiet lately in the transition group where we could maybe get you in touch with other groups. Rod asked me to do this promo, so I've done it. Thanks, Rod. And just another quick plug. It's lovely to see Diane up there, and Rick mentioned the Greens. And if you want to get involved at a grassroots level, at a political level, come and have a talk to me. We're trying to get the Greens back more in touch with grassroots action. And while there's lots of scope for other sort of community groups and not-for-profits, we do have this political layer that we need to keep plugging away at.